All right, how we doing, guys? I hope everybody's having a happy Friday. Welcome back. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos, and today I got my good buddy Dr. Michael Moeller with us today. How you doing, brother?
What's going on, man? Happy to be here, as always. 420, are you celebrating?
No, no, not me.
Got off that path a while ago, huh?
Yeah, yep. But we got a very interesting conversation for you guys today. We're going to be getting into all aspects of men's health, really. So we're going to be getting into, let me try to figure out where to sit here. There we go. We're going to be getting into testosterone. We're going to be getting into fitness, diet, the whole works. So if you guys have any questions throughout this, make sure to let us know. Send them in, and you can ask Dr. Michael Moeller. Dr. Mo is actually what you go by. And so before we get into it, you want to explain to everybody kind of who you are. You've been on the podcast before. The channel's grown a bit, actually, since last time we've talked. So if you want to talk about maybe your background, where you're from, what type of medicine you do, and then sort of your clinic and what you do now.
Yeah. So born and raised in a farm in Southern Illinois, and long story short, I kind of went through what I call the broken medical care system. And like anything, a lot of times it's about what you know instead of who you know. I was originally going to be a history teacher, found out kind of history, there's a lot of politics in there and you have to go one way or the other. You know, I know you've talked a lot about that on your channel. And then I got into health. I wanted to be a health teacher and realized the food guide pyramid was controlled by big chemical companies. You know, get your 12 servings of grains a day. You know, it's real good for you. And I actually became sick myself, and I had to kind of fix myself after seeing several doctors. And so at that point, I kind of realized that in life, you have to kind of take responsibility for yourself. This is all about your personal journey, and you need to become as equipped as possible to handle all facets of life. So at that point, I kind of decided to become a doctor. And then when I started looking at the different philosophies, I looked at the regular MD route. And a lot of it, there's a time and place for it, but it's very like symptom based. It's more about treating the symptom than treating the cause. A good example is when you get a fever. You know, they want to nuke the fever. The fever's good because it kills stuff, but we take ibuprofen and we reduce the fever, which is actually, I would say, anti-logos. You know, it's going against what the system is trying to do. So I looked at chiropractic, I looked at osteopathic medicine, and I eventually found the degree of a naturopathic doctor. So again, it's kind of eclectic. It's out there, but we're licensed in 24 states. In the state of California, I'm a doctor. I have a DEA license. I can prescribe testosterone, and I also know a lot about herbs and exercise. As a personal trainer and a bodybuilder before I went to medical school. And so now I just focus really on what we call regenerative medicine. I help you and your body regenerate, heal itself, and become as resilient as possible. So I spent the last couple of years, I'm out in Orange County, Laguna Hills, and walking the path and learning a lot of the newer stuff coming out, peptide therapy, hormone replacement, IV therapy, and trying to utilize the body and help it regenerate itself instead of masking symptoms. So it's my elevator speech, which is a little long, but
no,
yeah, man.
We got all day, so you don't even have to give us the elevator. But and so before we really get into anything, I want you to highlight, because again, this stream is specifically for men's health. In previous video, I've talked about masculinity. We kind of did that in the last stream with Made by Jim Bob. And so this then is, okay, there's a problem within society, the role of the masculine, both at a sort of societal, a psychological level, but in a very practical and physical. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today with you, is really get into the physical and the practical. And so what are the areas that men need to really concentrate on when focusing on really getting themselves into shape? You know, if our bodies are our temples, as the Bible says, then we need to start taking a lot better care about it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think obviously what differentiates women from men? Men, we have a lot more testosterone.
Right.
That's what's going to give you your body hair. That's what's going to grow the testes, the penis, to give you the muscles, give you the motivation, give you the masculinity. That's really is tied to. And, you know, philosophically, there's a big debate. I think that there is a big connection between neurotransmitters and motivation, dopamine, serotonin, and testosterone hormone, but all these different ways in how we develop. So as a guy, especially in the current paradigm that we're in now, and I talk about this a lot on my YouTube channel, and one of my big talks is a lot about testosterone replacement, because one of the main things guys need to understand is, women have their cycle, and we don't really take that angle when we look at guys. Women have their progesterone and estrogen going down, which every month they get ready to basically try and have a baby, where with guys we're a little bit different. But what happens with women is they hit menopause and basically their estrogen and progesterone shut off. With guys, we have andropause. When you're in your 18s to 22, and most guys probably remember that, you're waking up, you're hiding your erections behind school books, the libido's through the roof, you're motivated, you want to play sports, and then slowly you start to lose that. By guys, you lose about 1% a year. And unfortunately, what's happening now in our society, due to, in my opinion, a variety of things, and a variety of things that you've talked about, I think there is a correlation. We know that if you're watching your sports team and your sports team loses, your testosterone goes down. Negative feedback directly inhibits testosterone. So being submissive, like not standing up for what you believe in my opinion, is going to lower your testosterone. It all goes together. Okay.
Right.
So, but you stack that on top of all the different forms of xenoestrogens, like plastics, BPA, those bind to the estrogen receptors in your body and have an estrogenic effect, which antagonizes testosterone. High sugar diets, not sleeping. There's so many different things that are lowering our testosterone. And what we're seeing right now is the testosterone levels, like in 1988, and we'll go by total testosterone to keep things simple. In 1988, the average 65-year-old male, his testosterone was about 650 milligrams per deciliter. Fast forward 20 years, you're now looking at it being about 450. So a 20 to 30% decrease. And so you have to kind of, really need to sit back and say, like, how is this happening?
Well, privately, you've also mentioned how the testosterone rates of people in the prime of their life, men, has drastically gone down as well.
Well, that's where, even if you're saying they're at 65, they're at 650, now they're at 450. What are they now? And it's the exact same thing. So actually, I need to relook at the statistics. 1/4 of men over the age of 30 and 1/3 of the men over the age of 40. Basically, so 1/3 of guys by the time they hit 40 are going to have diagnosable low testosterone.
Wow.
By serum tests, by blood.
Wow.
Okay. And the funny thing about that is that the levels have been continually to drop. The reference range 3 years ago for this marker, what I was talking about, they said 1,200 to 350 was normal. It's actually almost all levels, because the levels of men are dropping, have now dropped the top end to 850 and the bottom end to 250.
Oh my gosh.
So you really have to be, and this is where we're coming back to, like, you got to arm yourself with knowledge here, because you don't understand what the medical care system has been doing. And we look at the population, 2/3 of them are overweight, 1/3 of us are obese at this point. So we got to really shake ourselves and wake ourselves up to being and living in harmony with nature and what God wants us to do. And that's what happens. You get off the off-beaten path and you go to hell. Like, you're sinning. What happens when you're sinning? You're eating improperly. You're consuming plastics. You're not sleeping well. You're masturbating all the time. You're putting yourself out of that harmony state.
Right.
So you got to really start working. And it's just the basics, eating right, sleeping right, and doing the things that we already know is over half the battle.
Right. And so, just to dispel any ideas that young men shouldn't be thinking about this, I mean, you recommend people as early as what to be trying to think about their overall health, their testosterone levels, their hormones, and all that stuff?
Well, it's like anything. Why not start earlier? When are you going to start educating a child? You're going to wait till they're in 3rd or 2nd grade? And that's one of the sad things. I first got my testosterone measured at 23. And like most things, lab work, in my opinion, we have reference ranges, and every person is they're different. Everyone's biologically different.
Right.
But if you can get blood work run at least once a year, then you have a general idea. You can look at trends, right? Because one thing with testosterone is we have something called your total. I can see how much is floating around in your bloodstream. We have something called sex hormone binding globulin and albumin that moves the testosterone around. So it's kind of like a boat in a harbor. If the boat is attached to a tugboat, it can't go out in the ocean and do its thing.
Right. So
the main thing you actually want to be looking at is what's called your free testosterone. And most doctors just look at a total. But we need to see what's free to do its thing.
Right.
And so, if you get your testosterone measured and say you're 23 and your testosterone is 1,200, right?
Right.
And then what are the symptoms of low testosterone? You're tired all the time, just think anti-masculine,
Right.
moody, you have no motivation, no muscle strength, low libido, failure to thrive.
Right.
So say that you're 23 and your testosterone is 1100, and then you feel fatigued. And then 6 months later, you're feeling fatigued, so you decide to get a blood draw. If your testosterone is still at 1100, probably not the cause. It's probably something else.
Right.
But if you can start measuring some of your lab work, the earlier you are, and then you have symptoms, you can kind of try and figure it out.
Right.
Now, the problem with the medical care system is they go exactly opposite. So a good friend of mine, he's in St. Louis. He's 33, has a couple kids. He calls me and says, "Hey, Dr. Well, he called me Michael. He said, hey, man, I'm just low libido, fatigued. I'm depressed. I don't feel like I want to do anything in my life. What's going on?" I said, "Go get your testosterone measured." He goes and gets his testosterone measured, and it comes back at 243. That's diagnosably low testosterone.
Yeah, that is low.
243 is low, okay? He calls me up, says, "Hey, I'm low." I'm like, "All right, they should probably start you. You can do diet and lifestyle stuff. We can talk about that later. But at that point, he should probably go on exogenous hormones. You should give him testosterone to bring his body back up to this normal state." And that's a philosophical question that I would love to dive into as well. But so I told him, I go, "Dude, you should probably get on TRT for a while so you're not depressed. You know, like you got to get you out of this funk."
Right.
And that's the same thing with antidepressants. I don't like them at all, but medicine is individualized. There might be a time and place when someone's in a really bad spot that you might use it just for a little bit to get them out. You know, individualized, and everyone's philosophy is different. But so in order for insurance, though, to cover his therapy, they have to have 2-level readings in the same week below 250. He goes back 3 days later, gets his blood measured. Now it's 255. Oh, the doctor said, "Yeah, your depression, your low libido, all these things you're complaining about, they have nothing to do with testosterone because your levels are normal." Even though the range is 250 to 800 and you're right here, then they say you're fine. Right. That's the problem with just like looking at levels. You know, you got the devil's in the detail. You got to kind of look at it and be like, well, and then too, it's like, what would it, you look at the risks and the benefits, and then you explain to the patient and say, I would, as a doctor, I go, "This is what I think you should do. Let's try it out for 3 months. See what happens." Right. I would love to share his personal information. I really should at this point to show us his Instagram. A year later, he's like ripped, wakes up every morning, goes for a run, jacked. Relationship with his partner is off the roof. He's playing with his girls every day, like just completely turned around.
Right.
And I don't want to go as far as say there's a conspiracy, but I'm seeing a lot of this, and I didn't learn about this much in school. And then when you get out, it's like, why are the suicide rates so high? Why is there depression so high? But men are lacking meaning. Yeah. And I think it's a negative feedback loop.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not getting any positive feedback. Therefore, the body doesn't produce testosterone.
Right.
Testosterone is a hormone of things are good. Let's build.
Yeah.
The opposite, we have cortisol. Things are bad. Time to tear down. And so when you get looping one way or another, you know, it's hard to turn it around.
Right. And I mean, that was a great summation, but maybe if you just wanted to hit even harder how testosterone is everything for men's health, regards to you know, your stomach, how it gets older and it kind of gets pushed out the whole beer belly, you know. Just speak on everything. Why testosterone as a marker for men's health? You got to start paying attention at a young age.
Yeah. So one of the big things that testosterone does is it increases your insulin sensitivity. Okay. What does insulin do? Insulin tells your body to store sugars. One of the main problems in the United States is we have diabetes. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand, number one, why diabetes is bad, or heart disease, you know, how does heart disease happen? But basically, and there's 3 things in my opinion, and there's a lot of debate on total cholesterol and all these things, but the way I see it's this way. You have a bloodstream, your bloodstream is a pipe, right? You get cholesterol and you get proteins floating around in that pipe. Well, sugar glycates. It sticks on to those proteins and albumins, and it makes them really spiky and rough. They roll down your bloodstream and they cut up your bloodstream. Well, then your bloodstream has to reheal itself, and then it scars up. That's partly what heart disease is. So that's why we watch how high your sugars are, and we watch how high your albumin and your cholesterol is. Mm-hmm. Now, what testosterone does, though, is it helps keep the sugar out of your body. It helps it out of the bloodstream and into the cells where it should go. So testosterone is extremely important for that. Testosterone is extremely important for regeneration. It's basically what tells the body to grow and expand. And too much regeneration can be bad. right? Again, we have everything in balance. Too
Right.
much regeneration, you get your immune system can be super active and you get autoimmune disease, and then it can be super weak and then you get cancer. It's all about balance. So, but what we know as far as statistics, as far as testosterone goes, men who have a testosterone level over 700 have a decreased chance for Alzheimer's, diabetes, and dementia. And also, as they age, prostate cancer. There's a big debate right now with, or has been with prostate cancer, but I would look at Abraham Morgentaler, and he has he's an MD, like a lot of research out there showing a lot of the benefits as far as testosterone goes. But it's just, some of it's obvious. If you're depressed, you're not gonna go to the gym. You're not gonna eat properly. You're not going to have meaningful relationships. One of the main things I hear about guys when their testosterone is corrected, they want to go and be outgoing and be communal and be fraternal. We don't have that anymore. Like, with like firefighters and like ancient tribes, it was always a form of camaraderie with guys. And right now, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's both what we eat, but it's also how we act.
Well, what's in the water? I mean, we've talked about this privately, that nothing in culture is aiding men's fitness specifically. Everything is really moving us towards, when we talk about a feminization of culture, and I talk about it at like a semiotic level, a relativistic understanding of epistemology, this or that, it's happening in the water. There's estrogen in the food. There's all these hormones. And so can you again speak on that, how it's even, we have to fight against culture.
Yeah, I mean, you got to filter your water for sure. I do not drink tap water, and I haven't for years. I got what's called the Big Berkey. It's a self-filtration system at home. You can do stuff like RO and distill, but then you take out all the minerals. So you got to make sure that you're remineralizing it with like Himalayan salt, Celtic salt. But yeah, one of the big examples is atrazine. Atrazine is all over the Midwest, and I remember it's pesticide or fungicide, one of the two, but it basically gets in the well water. And I've known people in my home county that have had decrease in fertility, and they stopped drinking well water, and their fertility came back. So it's still very debatable exactly the mechanism of action of atrazine, but it has something to do with sexual differentiation. That's the Alex Jones and put chemicals in the water, turning the frogs gay. But, there's something really to be said about that all these hormonal imbalances, the xenoestrogens, like I said, the plastics, and I don't think there's enough evidence to show, you think about stuff like I was using a cavi wipe, like a very hard distillator, like you don't want to put that stuff on your skin, literally, like, because you got to think too, your skin, people, biggest organ in the body. One of the worst thing about women, what we call endocrine disruptors, like women get hit with they just pile chemicals on their skin. Like what you think about, like makeup, deodorant. There's thoughts, and again, I can't speak too much to it about, aluminum is a heavy metal, and you put it in your armpit, and there's talks about it causing breast cancer because you have lymph nodes here. Your lymph nodes help you detox, right? Now, again, I don't have 100% know all these things, but I'm like, if you don't have to 100% use aluminum in your deodorant, and there's thoughts that it might be bad, like why the heck chance it? Like that's me. I'm like, well, maybe plastics aren't that bad. Yeah, but they could be. So how is it really that hard not to use plastics? And it is. I still drink from plastic water bottles every time.
I know. As soon as you said that, I looked over this thing right here.
Yeah. Dang it. And then one of the big things is like, it leaches worse when it's like in the sun and it's hot. Right? You can do. How many of you have opened up a plastic bottle and drank? You're like, tastes like plastic. Microwaving stuff in plastic containers is going to leach it a little bit more. But, back to your main point, you get to that, and then you get into like your ADHD medications. When kids are growing up using these medications, those will lower testosterone. And it's funny. I actually heard a joke where this guy was arguing with the teacher's like, your son has ADHD. He's like, that's BS. I saw him play with his Legos for 4 hours last night. That kid has no problem paying attention. It's just like, you're boring. You got to do a better job, Right. So, and again, I think men are primordially, we're meant to be more active. We're meant to be more out and doing things and lifting. And you and I both are on the train of, you and your buddy did your thing on jiu-jitsu, right?
Yep.
And martial arts in the form of what does that do for your testosterone?
Absolutely.
And it does a lot. Heavy exercising increases your testosterone.
Right.
So,
And that,
and that's frowned upon. Kids wrestling in grade school. Oh, they're in trouble. Like it's like, no, guys are meant to wrestle. Like, look at puppies, look at animals. Like, they grow and they wrestle, and they need the hand-eye coordination. Like, when you're wrestling, you're activating different parts of your brain.
right. Right. And well, can you speak to then what it is that your clinic does in regards to using logos? Because you too have been on a similar path as a lot of the guys on this channel. You've come back to a Christian orientation in terms of your spiritual and religious worldview. And what you've wanted to do, again, with what your knowledge, your specialty in men's health, is build a clinic that actually focuses on the logos of the masculine, individual, and what is the ideal ordering of health. And so you want to talk about kind of what you've been really focused on lately in your YouTube channel?
Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of, there's some fringe stuff like peptides. I mean, at the end of the day, really, you need to get back to the basics, right? Especially with testosterone. Got to be sleeping. All right. They've shown if you're on night shifts, you're sleeping 5 to 6 hours. After like 2 to 3 weeks of sleeping for 5 to 6 hours a night, your testosterone is going to drop 30 to 40%. There's also big debates because hormones fluctuate throughout the day, but also sugar is really bad for that. And overall, just stress, too much stress all the time. And we just live in such an environment anymore that is just so dang mentally stressful. Like, don't get me wrong, our great grandparents had the Great Depression and everything, but there's a different type of anxiety that comes. Like, we're literally waking up and we're thinking about all the terrible things that's going to happen. At least in my experience with my patients, this leads to erectile dysfunction. It leads to ED. We can kind of dive into that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that anxiety, anytime you feel anxious, you're releasing cortisol, and your body says, I'm not safe, and this is not good. Not time to reproduce. It's time to run. It's time to hide. It's time to problem shoot. So basically, first thing is you got to get back to the basics. Start eating healthy. Get away. Just don't buy stuff out of a box, dude. If you can just don't eat bread, don't eat sugar, you're literally like 90% of the way there.
Right.
In my opinion. Then my diet, I have my own opinion of diet, which we can get into.
Yeah, we're gonna get into carnivore, more meat-based diets. I know some of the guys on here. Of course, all the Orthodox that held the Lenten fast, they are now off that, so they can indulge in some meat and some dairy. But some of them have been fasting. But somebody like Jay Dyer and some of the other guys, Primal Edge Health, they advocate for the carnivore diet. So I want to get into that with you later.
Yeah. And so just like peeling it back a little bit, but yeah, getting back to the basics. And then, so yeah, looking at things that the guys have really been swept under the rug. Women are twice as likely to go to a doctor for anything. Guys, unless it's broken or falling off, most likely aren't going to go to a doctor. And then when they do, they really play it down. I've had guys, the vast majority of my patients who I saw in the beginning were almost all coming in for ED. Because it's finally a problem that's like, okay, I got to fix this.
Right.
Whether it's heart palpitations, they're overweight, they're, having indigestion, it doesn't really bother them. But until they can't perform in the bedroom, they're like, okay, maybe it's actually time for me to go and see a doctor. So opening up a space where guys can talk about that. But then again, at the end of the day, what I focus on is regenerative medicine. And that's where hormones really come into big play. Having higher amounts of estrogen helps your body to actually store on fat. We want to make sure that there's a good balance of that. So hormone replacement therapy is really big at my clinic. And then I use some of these other cutting edge therapies. Peptide therapies are big ones. And peptides are just amino acid sequences. Basically, you have amino acids. You eat protein. It gets broken down into peptides and then broken down into amino acids. You probably heard eat your collagen peptides, right? And that comes from the ligaments often of cows or whatever.
Right.
And there's specific amino acids that tell your body to do specific things. So, but you can also have peptides as messengers in the body that are similar to hormones. Specifically, one is called body protecting compound 157. It's produced in your stomach lining. Your stomach lining regenerates itself very quickly and very often. And so when you take it exogenously, it just helps your body overall heal quicker and better all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's a naturally occurring amino acid substance that's in your body. Again, when I'm using all my hormone replacement therapy is what you call bioidentical. So it looks exactly similar to what your body produces. And why I bring that up is because in the past and with like anabolic steroids, those are not bioidentical.
Right.
Bioidentical is when you take two keys and they look the same. When you're using an anabolic steroid, you are using a key that it will fit the lock, but it's really not good for the door, and maybe it'll open the door easier, you'll put on more muscle, but long term, we really don't understand downstream effects of those. So yeah, I medically, that's a lot of what I do is testosterone replacement. I do a lot of regenerative medicine, so platelet rich plasma. You take your own blood out, you centrifuge out all the good stuff, and then you can place it in the body to help with regrowing hair, with helping regenerate a joint. Because as we age, all those places have very poor blood flow.
Right.
And then I do that, and then I just started doing some neuropathy too as well. So neuropathy is tough. That's when your nerves kind of degenerate, and then you don't have feelings in your hands and your feet. So that's kind of my main gig right now, and that's where a lot of my YouTube, my first year or two, a lot of my talk was exactly what I'm doing here, is telling guys like, go get your testosterone check. Like, you got to get in line now, because often what I hear with guys is they wait till they're 55 and they don't realize it because they were up here, and then it's a slow decline, and then they're here. It's kind of like they were benching 225 and they've taken 15 years off, and then they go and try and bench 135 and they're like, whoa, what happened? And it's like, at that point, it's like, you've been degenerating. Like, our life, we're born, we grow, and then we degenerate.
Right.
So what I try and do is, how do I slow down the degeneration? Slow as possible. And we have to optimize the body in all ways, shapes, and sizes. I really work on resiliency, helping you have the proper supplementation, implementing the proper diet and lifestyle, and then using, hormones, IVs, peptides, if they're needed.
Can you speak to losing hair? I mean, I'm sure that's something that probably a lot of people can relate to. A lot of the guys that are, I'm 30, various guys, hitting the 30s. Yeah. So can you speak to the hair loss?
Yeah. I mean, my opinion, and I think I can back this up with a decent amount of clinical literature. A lot of it is genetic. It just seems like one way or the other, certain guys will lose a little bit quicker. Now, same thing, right? With the degeneration. Let's say that genetically you're probably going to be bald by the time you're 65. Certain people have it, certain people don't. And you see it. Like, it's weird. You can even see brothers who are like, wow, how does he have a full head of hair and he doesn't? And they, they're living very similar lifestyle.
Right.
Now, let's just say that you eat a standard American diet and you're going to get bald by the time you're 60. And I say standard American diet, we call it a SAD diet. Potato chips, McDonald's, all that bull.
Right. Yeah.
But if you start eating things right, because inflammation will increase how quickly that you degenerate, and that will be your hair. That will be how sore you are at the gym, your joints, how well do they regenerate, and your hairs, it's all coming from collagen fibers.
Right.
So you need to give your body the proper nutrition. Like, how can you fix a car if you're not giving it the right stuff? Right. Everything you are is literally what you eat. There's nothing on your body that at one point, like, you ate a cheeseburger, that part of that beef became your bicep. Part of it became something else.
Right. Preach, brother. That's for the Eucharist.
What's that?
I said that's the importance of the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm. It's metaphorical.
Right. No, actually,
it is the body.
Right. I help with a Zoom courses on Sunday after liturgy. And that was actually what we were talking about. We are finishing up our book. It was actually by Schmemann, for those interested, on Great Lent. I have a video that we're going to do, but Subdeacon Mark, who some of the guys know, he was actually talking about, going over that it's Orthodox theology that you are what you eat. And that's why receiving the Eucharist frequently and all this stuff is so important, along with living a healthy lifestyle. So, and
your body's a temple, and Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone, right? So then that's kind of the thing is, we could sit here and I can inject your body with all the testosterone that you want. But again, at the end of the day, you have to make lifestyle changes. You have to do the things that are proper. You have to act in a proper way. And once that gets aligned, then I think you eat better. I remember when I was in grade school, I was actually in high school at this point, but I was eating like a bowl of ice cream in my basement. And I was watching demonic MTV, see what you know about it. And there was something called I Want the Perfect Body. And there was a bodybuilder. And I saw how meticulous he was. I'm eating 4 ounces of beef. I'm eating 3 ounces of cauliflower. I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. And I remember watching that and being like, that is so miserable. Why would I ever want to do that? And fast forward 4 years later, I do my own show. And part of me, I didn't want to do it because I'm like, oh, how can I quit eating McDonald's? How can I quit eating ice cream? How can I quit? It's like, once you shift, and you and I have talked about this, once you shift your perspective and you get aligned with the truth, you don't want the bullshit. I haven't eaten McDonald's in 10 years. And I wouldn't feed that to anyone anywhere. It's not even real food. It's fake. Have you seen that? Like, they'll put a McDonald's burger on a counter and it doesn't get moldy or degenerate.
Right.
That is going into you. That is becoming your body.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that is not living. That is like just this
I don't even know. That's plastic at the end of the day. You know, it's
Right.
like
Some
margarine.
sort. Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
chemical soup. It's like your body can't do anything with it. Hopefully it just poops it out. Really.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, man does not live by bread alone. And that's where I'm saying all these things go together. And it's like, what are your lifestyle doing? How are you connected to God? And if your body's truly a temple, and it's hard, right? Sin is real. I've eaten, I indulged on coconut ice cream last night. All right. Had some sugar. I admit it. And I'm doing my best every day to work, live and become more and more disciplined.
Right.
So I just don't want a lot of people get discouraged. Like, oh, I can't quit eating this. I can't eat that. I'm like, for me, it was first like I got rid of bread. I remember it was like first thing I'm like, let me just stop eating bread for a little bit. And I leaned out and I felt better. I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. It's kind of like telling the truth. In the beginning, it sucks, right? But if you've been telling lies for so long, it gets so much harder and you're so anxious and you're lying. It's the same thing with bread and sugar. It becomes a feedback system, a dopamine loop. Your blood sugar becomes so imbalanced that you're just seeking it. You're eating it every 3 to 4 hours,
right? Because
the body isn't maintained. It was not meant to be that way,
right? Oh, that's a great point. Maybe now we can move into just talking about fitness. Again, related to overall men's health. I've talked multiple times. Well, actually, I have one more comment on the diet thing. I forgot that I wanted to say, and that is why I think the conversation we're having is so important is a lot of the younger guys in this sort of alternative Christian movement, traditional values. I'm not going to name names, but some of them may promote the exact thing which you're condemning in regards to a sort of degenerate diet that's not going to feed your body and let alone feed your soul and allow you to excel and flourish, which is the purpose of all this stuff. And so that's why our conversation is really, it goes beyond just, oh, culture is bad. We need to, resort to Christianity. We need traditional values. It's no, you actually need to put it on yourself and you need to start taking care of your own body and all that stuff. So the neoteny, which is just a good biological term for the retention of juvenile characteristics into adulthood, I think that's what we see when people aren't wanting to take their diet seriously. That is a form of neoteny. That is a form of not wanting to get off that sugar and bread diet that you mentioned. That is a feedback loop. So your thoughts, it feeds the sort of neoteny of why you even want it in the first place.
Yeah, and there's a feedback too to like, for me, I started dieting. A lot of it, to be honest, was for performance. Right? Like I started researching. I was in a bodybuilding. I'm like, okay, I need to eat this many grams of protein a day. I need to stop eating like this meal, like McDonald's. That is a waste of a meal for me. Every meal is counting for me to get into perfect shape, aesthetics. I want a good physique. I want to represent God with my body. And it doesn't. I'm not representing God with my body if I'm throwing down cheeseburgers and I'm not respecting it and throwing all the sugar in. So for me, it really started off with performance. I'm like, okay, what does my body need to perform optimally? And I don't compete anymore. I haven't competed in like 7 or 8 years, but I still eat in that way because it makes my body feel good. I feel like I look good, and I'm trying to respect the one body that I've been given.
Right. All right. Well, enough belaboring on the diet. In fact, we're going to come back to carnivore specifically. Unless you want to get into it right now, since we're already talking about diet.
Yeah. I mean,
so
we can kind of.
Yeah. So, so that, as I mentioned, actually, in my last video, since January, of course, I didn't partake in the Lenten fast, so forgive me. But I was able to eat steak, and I have eaten steak basically every day since January 1st, and I have absolutely noticed a difference and love the way I feel on this diet where I eat a steak and eggs in the morning. And then I'm very lenient, so I'm not on the carnivore diet, but I normally eat something meat heavy in the evening. So I just eat twice a day, and I make sure to eat before 7 o'clock. So a sort of intermittent fasting. I'm only doing 12-hour intermittent fasting, so I'm not hardcore on it. But just the meat focus and the intermittent fasting from 7 to 7, I've noticed a big difference, and I feel great. I feel just as strong as I was. I've lost 10 pounds, but I just feel better. And so curious then what your thoughts are on what I just described, because I still eat carbs and stuff. I haven't rejected that totally out of the diet. That's why I'm saying I'm not on the carnivore diet, but certainly whatever I eat in the evening is going to be meat heavy. But I'm curious on your thoughts on that, and then your thoughts on the carnivore diet and how that all relates to men's health and testosterone.
Yeah. So a couple different things. I think to start from the beginning of that, and I think I've heard this. I don't think I invented this. I don't claim anything that I'm saying that I invented. I've just heard it from multiple people saying different things. Um, you remember basic animal biology, right? So we take sugar, glucose, and then we go through glycolysis, and then our body produces acetylcoenzyme A and pyruvate, and then our body basically depends if we have oxygen or not, and then we can go into the Krebs cycle or we can go into the pyruvate lactate cycle. But basically, what I'm saying at the end of the day is we have sugar, and then our body turns it into energy, and it can do it in different ways.
Right.
Our body can produce sugar when we eat foods. Now we have enzymes, and in my opinion, I think that these enzymes get up and down regulated, especially like a factory, right? And if one side, so imagine that you have a factory that processes protein, you have a factory that processes carbohydrates, you have a factory that processes fats. Now, each of those factories are going to require different workers and different enzymatic processes and different coenzymes, right? So an easy one to break down. A lot of people have heard of tryptophan. Tryptophan is an amino acid, and it turns into serotonin and melatonin. But in order for your body to do that, an enzyme is used, and then you use cofactors like vitamin C and B6, magnesium, and zinc. And so basically your body takes tryptophan, moves some stuff around, boop, 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 boop. Now you have serotonin, happy hormone. Now your body can do something with it. In my opinion, as we age, with carbohydrates, one thing is it's called insulin resistance. When we start just using the carbohydrate factory all the time, and we're not using the fat and we're not using the protein factory, the body gets dependent one way and it becomes unresilient. So as soon as you start, number one, all that factory is going to get run down quicker. Insulin resistance is a theory basically that when your body's producing insulin, it's just not working right. You just used it so much. The receptors, so basically sugar's in your bloodstream, insulin comes and stores it in the cell. Something happens where the messenger, there's some type of something that goes haywire there. And that's why you see people go carnivore, they go keto, because that's a different way for your body to use fat as energy. Mm-hmm. Now, in my opinion, protein is the X factor, because protein, these amino acids can be basically converted into anything. Carbohydrates cannot be converted into proteins. Fats cannot be converted into proteins, but proteins can be converted into them. So in my opinion, unless you have kidney damage, you're better off over consuming that. And then your body becomes very good at improvising. It can take an amino acid and do what it needs to. But if you have a carbohydrate, it doesn't learn to improvise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that our society has become so influenced on carb heavy, right? Food guide pyramid, 12 servings of grains a day. Sugar's literally everywhere and in everything. And then you become dependent on it, okay? So one of the things is too, if your body was a fire, sugar is like paper. You throw it on there, it's going to, you get a lot of energy and then it goes away. And then, so your body releases insulin, stores all the sugar, which is inflammatory. And then your blood sugar drops and then you produce cortisol to raise you back up, right? When you eat meat and when you eat fats and protein, your level of energy is way more stable. And you can probably talk to that.
Yeah. That was the biggest thing I've noticed is the better energy level. I've always been a bit of a napper, given that I like to read so much, but I actually, not that I don't sometimes, but I've definitely noticed the energy difference with the more meat-based diet. And I never feel bloated in my stomach.
Well, how do you get bloated? Bloated is carbohydrates being fermented in your gut. Right. And that's one of the big difference, right? Like cows have 6 stomachs. They're not stomachs, but they have fermentation places basically. So when you take in fiber, the cellulose that we can't break down, we have to have a microbiome. We have to have bacteria go down there and fermentate it. And they produce short chain fatty acids, which also come from meat and fats as well. And there's good. I'm not going to lean one way or another. I think that there are plenty of benefits to the carnivore keto way. I've done keto. I've never gone strictly carnivore, kind of like you. There's been times where I've went extremely meat heavy. I've done vegan. I've done vegetarian. But at the end of the day, and two, I don't think we really understand necessarily. We have what are called SNPs, and they basically tell our body how to their genetic imprints of basically how those enzymes work. Some people have faster or slower enzymes. Mm-hmm. I have something called MTHFR deficiency. So I have a harder time breaking down hormones. So therefore, if I have caffeine, I'm going to be way more stimulated for a longer period of time. Caffeine's going to release dopamine. My body has a hard time breaking dopamine down. Therefore, I'm going to be anxious and get too excited. Right. Someone else can drink coffee and go to sleep.
Right.
So again, it's just it's so individualized, and every person's going to be a little bit different. And that's, you know what I'm saying, it's like one part of it. What were your ancestors like? There's a reasons when we look at type 2 diabetes. I remember, man, I was sitting in the sweat lodge with a Lakota Native American, and he's like, the diabetes runs rampant on the reservations, like it was a plague.
Right.
Literally. But why is it? Because do you think when you look at the Apaches and when you look at the Crow, like a lot of them were living off buffalo. That's literally all they ate. They were on buffalo. Yeah, they might like try and go out in the wilderness and find me 50 berries. Just try and find me 50, a handful. Show me a handful of berries. Show me a handful of peanuts. Like when you look at eating a peanut, I eat peanut butter, but it doesn't make sense from a primordial. When was someone able to collect 100 peanuts and smash it up and eat that every day? For real,
Right. No, it's a great perspective to have.
So when you look at the Inuits, those people lived off of whale blubber and seal and just basically meat. There's I can't remember the African tribe. They start with M. They live off of like cow's blood and milk. And that's literally it. Like, and they have hardly any incidences of heart disease.
Wow.
And there's on the opposite end, there's a lot of like vegan and vegetarian places, and they call them the blue zones, where those people live longer. So that's where I'm still trying to figure out. I don't know how much diet plays a huge role, but I do know what these people have in common is they're eating real food.
Right.
And they're not stressed like crazy.
I read an article that was purporting the opposite, that the cultures that ate more meat lived longer on average than India, which was the sort of sample culture for a vegan-based lifestyle, or a vegetarian based. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that turned people on to vegetarian and veganism was called the China study. Did you hear about this? A big retro study, and just kind of looked at what people ate and saw who lived longer. The problem with a lot of those studies is that they throw all the meat eaters in one group, and a lot of times that's McDonald's. It's versus vegans who actually might, if you're vegan or going vegan or vegetarian, you're already going to be a little more health conscious. And I think we're going to find that out with the paleo carnivore community. Like a lot of those people are health conscious. Right. What's interesting is one of the things with testosterone is that smokers tend to have higher testosterone.
Oh, really?
And yeah. And so what's crazy about that is a lot of people say that the nicotine or the tobacco increases testosterone. And I personally am like, or people with testosterone have a higher tendency to smoke, right? We know that too with guys with higher testosterone, more likely to be business owners, more likely to take risks, and therefore succeed. Right. Peterson talks about that a lot, like the outliers who are on the edge. Almost all the guys who are highly successful, higher amounts of testosterone. And the guys who are in prison, higher testosterone. So it's a double-edged sword. It gives you more, and that's why you got to be disciplined.
Right.
So, but at the end of the day, I think when I sit back and I look at keto and carnivore, the main thing is the reduction of the carbohydrates. Most of the time you're eating more real food. It's hard to go carnivore and not be eating, you're eating meat, which is like, it's not out of a box. And then from there, keeping away from the sugars. And if you could, like I said, just get rid of bread and sugar. But some people, I think once they fully commit, it's easier, right? Like when you join a gym and you get a personal trainer, you're just way more disciplined. If you switch a diet and then you go carnivore or keto, that gets you in line, dude. Whatever, man. Yeah. Like same thing with exercise. I'm not a big CrossFitter. I personally like to stick with kind of a hybrid of weights, but it's what I'm comfortable with, and I like doing it. If you like doing CrossFit, you like doing yoga, whatever it is, I really think you should be doing weights. Increases testosterone, increases ligament densities, it decreases chance for bone degeneration and osteoporosis as you age.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in, because that's what I was wanting to ask you. One of the reasons why I advocate lifting weights, of course, I like to do it, so I don't say that people need to go to the gym and lift heavy weights. But one of the big factors in regards to men lifting heavy weights is the bone density, and how that can't be taken away from you as you age. Like I can build up a bunch of muscle and I can get small within just a few months, but the bone density, that's gonna stay with me at a much longer rate. And so when I'm 80 years old, everybody's seen the old guy who never stopped lifting weights, and he's still pretty shredded. He's like 60 years old, but that bone density is what's so important. That's going to allow him to walk up straight, when he's 90 years old or whatever. He's not going to be hunched over. And so go ahead and speak then to what you would recommend at a fitness level and why you like or recommend lifting weights, heavy weights and stuff like that, and how that relates to testosterone, bone density, all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, lifting heavy is all in perspective. Be safe. First thing I tell almost all people is
agreed.
So just little consent there or whatever. That first thing, be safe. Me personally, and you're probably at this point anymore, I've hurt myself enough. I tore my lat off that like if I'm in the gym and I feel a little bit off, something tweaks a little bit, I'm done. Right? Don't make things worse, because then it's kind of like workman's comp. You go into work, you hurt your back, and next thing you know, you're on your bed at home, stuck addicted to pills.
Right.
And it's the same way. If you're in the gym and you can create a pattern that you're there and you're there doing it every day, that's the most important thing.
Right.
Now, with weightlifting, we know that it's called Wolff's Law, which is basically the concept is like anything that is pressed on is going to regenerate stronger and better always. That's one of the big things about the astronauts. They say when they go into space that they lose a lot of their bone density because they go for a long period of time without having any type of pressure on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is a big conversation I have with testosterone. Testosterone decreases chances of osteoporosis and increases bone density. And I didn't really talk about kind of the negative or side effects of it. But again, I always kind of play it both ways. How many elderly people, over the age of 70 fall and break their hip and then end up in the hospital with a major surgery, and then they get pneumonia and die?
Right.
That's usually a lot of times what gets elderly people are little things like that.
Right.
So if and like you're saying, you've seen that guy at the gym that's still deadlifting 300 or 400 pounds. He's not breaking his hip when he falls down the stairs. Right. And to be able to, how many people just as elderly to be able to, and even now I would challenge people at home, how many people can still sit down and do 5 to 10 push-ups? Just little things like getting on and off the floor.
Right.
Like, and it's just being able to be resilient as you're, taking the stairs. How many people are over the age of 50 that just jump on the elevator because they don't have the physical ability to take the stairs?
Right.
So I think exercise is extremely important, not only for that, but also as a discipline. It's like anything, like your diet. The more disciplined you are in one area of your life, usually it transfers to other facets. So, if I could go back on me personally, I didn't get into martial arts,
mm-hmm.
But I grew up in the Midwest and I played a lot of ball sports, football, basketball, baseball, and then I transferred into lifting. Because too, you got to think about our brain is a muscle as well. We have our cerebellum and our parietal lobe, and everything has you have neuroplasticity.
Right.
And just little things like if your head's sitting like this, and little things that you don't do in sports is like look out of the side of your eyes. A lot of people, as they age, kids can do that forever, but as they age, you'll get dizzy. Like me, even myself, I'll get dizzy if I look out of the side of my eyes or certain areas because the neuroplasticity is gone. But when you're playing sports and you're moving around, and then too, like how many people can stand on one leg and look this way? There's a whole form of medicine. It's kind of chiropractic and the they had a name for it, I can't remember, but they work on working the brain in that way. And then your brain, all these things too, weightlifting, you're going to be producing growth hormone. So regeneration, you're going to be producing testosterone. Thymosin beta 4 is an amino acid sequence that's in the body after it degenerates that recruits stem cell and angiogenesis. Blood flow is the key to life, right? Vampires. Like, why do you think the vampires are out there, or they're sucking the blood of all the young people? Because in that blood are the stem cells and the good stuff that regenerates. So we need to have the body produce more stem cells and growth factors. How do we do that? We go to the gym. We fast. Fasting increases growth hormone. It helps the body learn to be more resilient and improvise. That's one of the coolest things about fasting when we talked about eating protein, is when you're in a fasted state, it's kind of like you got a big factory again, and there's just junk everywhere. And you're used to getting carbohydrates pumped in there every day, and then you run out and the body's like, what else can we burn? Oh, what about like this old staircase that we're not using anymore? Oh, that'd be perfect, right? So your body learns, there's something called cellular senescence, and that's basically when your cells basically go dormant and they just stop working properly. And all these things, fasting helps clear all the senescent cells out of the body. So then you're able to regenerate better and gets out of the bad cells. And that too, decreases chances for cancer and a wide variety of other things.
Right.
So exercise, can't beat it. It's going to help you sleep better, and just play with your kids, play with your family, like be able to who knows? Maybe there's a baby in her car. You got to go and lift it up.
Right.
Little things.
Well,
you can be a hero.
And especially since the majority of men aren't construction workers, they're not outside, they're not lifting weights, you're not active. So what are you doing with your body? It can't just be, like I sit in a chair the majority of the day. And so I'm always conscientious of my posture and stuff like this. And maybe you can speak on that as well, is people always hunched over on the computer or reading or whatever it is, that it's, most people's lives are so sedative that, they're always just sitting somewhere. Can you speak to that in regards to maybe men and posture and again, another reason why to lift more weights?
Yeah. And resiliency in general. And you see that with little old men and women. They're walking like this. Their spine and their muscles have literally been re-educated in a different position. Okay. So, I mean, I have a standing desk right here. That's so I try and every once in a while at least stand up, go for a walk a couple times a day. I'm inside a lot, right? Because I'm seeing patients, I'm doing medical stuff. So I'm not like I was when, you're on the farm or anything.
Right.
And yeah, we get something like they kind of call it the upper cross. And this is all the guys that like bench too much and you want to build up the chest, which is great. But you got to think about if your pec muscle starts out here on your humeral head and it connects down into your intercostals here. When you sit in a certain way, again, this has to go with your brain. Your brain tells you right now, like my brain is talking to my low back. My low back is straight. My quads are tight. My hamstrings are tight and I'm standing. Right now, if you stand in a certain position for a long period of time, why do you think you get tight? Because you're literally re-educating your body, like forward head tilt. Like your head is here, so then your body's muscles get used to being in that spot.
Right.
What happens if you jerk it real quick? That's how you pull a muscle, because the neural education says this is wrong. And so what happens is we slowly, as we get older, we sit like this, we slouch, and then the muscles get taut here. That's why it's so hard to open up your shoulders. And so we sit and we drive, and we sit on our computers like this all day. Again, it's not natural. It's not the way you're looking at animals. Animals don't do that.
Right.
So a lot of that too, you got to be proactive. I think that's great. Doing arm circles. I like doing what's called, I forget what they're called, but I basically flex the rhomboids. They're the muscles right here. You want to pinch those, and those help rotate the shoulders back.
Yeah.
And they also help like your scalenes and your levator scapula, all these muscles in your neck get tight. So it just kind of helps realign it. And there's controversial studies whether or not Tony Robbins talks about that a lot. Like you stand up in a power position and it increases dopamine, serotonin, and testosterone. I feel like I went back and forth. I felt like I found studies when I first heard that, and then I went back and I couldn't find any. But again, I don't think it hurts anything.
Right.
Really. I mean, I feel better when I'm like shoulders out and chest back,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, would you like to get into then another thing that, people don't talk about, but is erectile dysfunction in regards to men's health?
Yeah.
And another thing that, men need to be aware of, especially the prevalence. I mean, you first speak to the prevalence of that in society. I think most people aren't even aware. And then how that is related to testosterone and taking care of your body.
Yeah, the statistics are something like 35% of the guys under the age of 40 have experienced at least like 6 to 12 weeks of it at one period of time. And then it's like, I don't even believe the statistics at this point, just because of all the patients I've seen. And maybe I have a bad sample size because people are coming in because they're sick. I'm a doctor, right? And
Sure.
I take a lot of time. So I won't say I pry people open, but I need to know what's going on in your life. I can't just give you a pill and say, see you later. I kind of need to really figure out what's going on to really help you.
Mm-hmm.
And often guys come in and they say they have low T, and then we get to the erection problems, right? And so again, when guys are 18 to 22, they're waking up with raw cards all the time, right? And that's because their testosterone's high. Basically, the body is forcing blood into the area so it regenerates and stays strong. Now, in order to get a good hard erection, right, our nervous system, we have two parts. We have what's called the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. I think parachute over here. Mm-hmm. And then we have the fight or flight, the sympathetic. And so I tell guys, I go, all right. They're like, hey, doc, why am I having problems? And I say, you're walking in the woods and you see a bear. Now, unless you're into some really weird stuff, not a really good time to get an erection, right? Unless you're into bears. I don't know. I try to convince my guys that that's bad for their health and stay away from that. But so I say, yeah, it's fight or flight. It's time to run. It's not time to mate. It's time to get the heck out of there. And so we have blood vessels in our body. And our blood vessels, like you've all experienced, they vasodilate. They open in one area and they close off another. So when that happens, your sympathetic nervous system kicks on, and the blood vessels to your brain and to your muscles kick on. So blood goes there to innervate it so it can run, fight or flight. You're in fight or flight mode now.
Right.
And so where does that blood get shut off? It's not going to your stomach anymore. It's not going to your kidneys as much anymore. It's not going to your penis anymore. All right. So then you got to think on the opposite end, how do you get a good heart erection? You need to be in a parasympathetic state. You need to be relaxed. So what's interesting about the penis compared to other organs, so you have cranial nerves. Your cranial nerve 10 is one of the main parasympathetic innervators.
Okay.
It goes to your stomach. So the vagus nerve goes to your stomach and helps you digest.
Right.
What's interesting actually about the penis is that it's partially innervated parasympathetically, and then you finish with the sympathetic innervation. So it's real weird. And that's why it is a little bit more complicated. And I think that's, you know, the way God intended for it to be, that you need to be healthy if you're going to reproduce, right? So you need to be able to be balanced. And unfortunately in our society, what I hear is this: guys working 50, 60 hours a week, you know, probably late 30s. I get them late 30s all the way to mid 50s.
Okay.
But I'd say usually early 50s is pretty much, depending on the personality of the guy, working 50, 60 hours a week. You know, maybe he's vice president of sales at Boeing or whatever it is. And they have 3 or 4 kids. Maybe one's about to go to college. Maybe one's 8 or 10. There's a dog or whatever. So they're working a job they don't really like. They're really high stressed. They come home. Maybe the relationship with their partner isn't going very well. Something's bad with the kids at school. They try and get intimate later when they're not really into it. They're tired. They want to sleep. Their partner approaches them. And then things happen, and then things don't happen. And then that becomes another anxiety. Then the next day, the guy's on his way to work. He's like, what was that about last night? Oh, I won't worry about it. You know. And then 3 days later, he forgot about it, but then he's sitting in his bed when his partner's touching him, and he's like, oh no, what if this happens again? And automatically you're in that sympathetic state. Your body says, I'm not safe here. I got to go. This isn't good. I'm scared. What happens? And it becomes a negative feedback loop.
Oh, wow.
So you couple the mental emotional aspect on top of the blood degeneration. Like, remember I talked about heart disease earlier. Heart disease, ED is heart disease in the penis. You're not getting blood flow down there, whether that's from the deterioration of your blood vessels, but also from psychosomatic.
Right.
And that's why there's a lot of drugs that cause ED because of the psychosomatic part, but then also the ones that mess with your blood vessels. A lot of the blood pressure medication decreases blood pressure. Well, how do you think you get blood down your penis? By increasing blood pressure down there. Right. So you're on a drug to stop blood pressure. So again, some guy comes in, he's like, I have ED. It's like, there could be about 5 or 6 things going on here realistically that, you know, could be low libido, could be this drug, could be your stress, probably, in my opinion, a little bit of all of it. Right. And so you got to start peeling that back. And that's the problem with medicine. You know, you go into a doctor, you say you have this, he's like, here's your Viagra, good luck. So, and I actually think really good things about Viagra and Cialis. There are a few of the pharmaceuticals that have very low side effect profile, and it does increase blood flow. It's called a PDEI inhibitor, or it's a PED inhibitor. Basically, the enzyme that opens up your blood vessels, it kind of shuts it off and helps blood flow stay better. So a lot of bodybuilders will take it for increase in performance, and it, you know, there are studies showing that it helps actually prevent a lot of neurocognitive decline by helping blood get into the brain better. So. Oh,
interesting. Well, then
it's a complicated one, man, and it's also taboo, right? No one wants to really talk about it.
Right, and that's why I wanted to bring it up today, just in regards to, not that anybody necessarily, well, I'm sure somebody is, but, you know, there's probably listening that probably this is really useful information because maybe they're having problems or they're not taking care of their body the right way, or the sort of psychological feedback loop that you were just talking about. And so, you know, really what we keep getting back is like lifestyle, which ties to a theological understanding, which you use, you know, to talk about your medicine, is logos, and that it's all balance and order, you know. So
discipline. And then I ask all my patients, do they have at least some form of spiritual something? Right? Because you know, you get into like even strange things like death anxiety and stuff that they have never, like, they don't have anything to go to. You know, it's funny. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day, and they were talking about, you know, trauma, right? Like how much like sexual trauma when kids are younger, that's going to have a big impact on when they grow up. And it was funny because I'm in natural medicine, and there's a lot of different tools: acupuncture, chiropractic, homeopathy, herbs and stuff. And she was telling me about a patient of hers who she had so much trauma and baggage, and she was so stressed, and she's like, she isn't doing any of these things. And it was funny because then I reflected on one of my patients who I thought was really well put together and didn't have the same problems. And I remembered my patient didn't do any of those things, but one thing she did is she was a big prayer. And people don't think about that. Like, how much of a difference is this? I have ED. I can't fix it. I'm scared. Why won't this go away? I'm going to a doctor. And then, if you live by faith, it's like, okay, hey, God's trying to teach me something. I'm going to pray that, God's going to take care of this. Completely different. That's parasympathetic, sympathetic. If you don't have a good faith, that in itself is going to put you more in a sympathetic state. And I can talk about that for myself from experience.
Yeah.
I've been down that rabbit hole and I'm like, oh, the universe is just we're just bags of meat. What's the point of all this? I'm not supported. That's not a good mindset to be in for your health.
Right. Well, can you lead that into then talking about basically epigenetics and mind state and all this stuff and we're talking about that stuff more medically, and then get into your own transition spiritually and how you've noticed a difference in your own life at a phenomenological, at a subjective level.
Well, and it's like anything. So in the epigenetics is going to be obviously passed down, but we don't even need to go that far. We can look at your life in 10 years. What happens when you work out every day? In 10 years, you're a completely different person, right? And those are going to activate certain genes, and those genes are going to activate certain enzymes, and that's going to produce you in a certain way. And then obviously we produce that. And that's when you can kind of get into ancestral. And this is where I do my best from an apologetic standpoint to try and figure out what mainstream science is saying with my theology with God, like from an epigenetic standpoint.
Right.
And when you look at it, it matches directly in line with, you have a family that's been living by a certain theology for a long period of time. And we see this in the social classes, right? Those people have a tendency to thrive. You have a really strong Christian background that's wholesome about a community and family that's ready to reach out to each other, probably have lower incidence of sexual trauma as children. You probably have an easier welfare state. Like people help each other out. Right. What does that do to your brain? We know that trauma, number one predictor of chronic disease is childhood trauma. It's something like 99% of all children that have a significant trauma before the age of 7 will have some type of chronic disease, whether it's an autoimmune disease, whether it's cancer, whatever it is, they have something that happens long. And that's because it turns on these genes.
Wow.
And how do you get through that? For instance, too, like the 12-step program, that is so enrooted in a higher power. And a lot of people have never kind of come to that, to eventually been like, look, these one of my buddies is a cop, and he told me he came in on a couple that were heroin addicts, and he was, the guy had overdosed and she thought he was going to die. And he started praying for both of them and kind of saying, hey, I don't know what you believe in, but in that case, you're scared of death. If you believe in Christ and you believe in living a good life, and it gives you something to overcome this negative aspects of the health. Right. We don't really think about it that way. In my opinion, most people don't. Right. So having that faith is going to enroot you into like I said, the parasympathetic state. It's going to help you produce happier thoughts. What does the Bible teach? What does Christ teach? Be thankful. It doesn't matter what's going on. You're being persecuted. Paul talks about it. I'm thankful for my persecution, right? What's the one verse about, like, being persecuted is going to build endurance, and endurance is going to build character, and character is going to build love, and all these things, and I butchered that. But it all comes back around of you're sitting in a state of faith. You're sitting in a state of grace, and I have grace. So when I mess up, like, God's going to forgive me. I'm going to do my best to rectify those faults. But when you live in a state of gratitude, they show that literally differentiates, and it produces more dopamine and serotonin, the happy hormones, compared to cortisol, the stress hormone.
Right.
And that's going to go back to the blood sugar problem, to the heart disease, to the ED, to the low testosterone, and all that. Right. So it's funny. Everyone thinks it's this complicated stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like, eat right, exercise, have faith. Yeah. You're 90% there. Right.
So how have you experienced that transition in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think the biggest thing for me is, and I'm an intellectual, you're an intellectual. I like taking ideas and turning them apart. I mean, I'm a small town farm boy now from Southern Illinois, living in Southern California, being a naturopathic doctor. Like, there's a lot of shifts that have to happen for me, and all part of God's plan. But for me, I went through a long stage of just trying to figure it all out. This is on me, right? Like, to have that until I eventually, I came to Christ. I'm like, look, dude, Jesus, I don't understand this stuff anymore. I'm going to do my best to know you, to know the science, to know what I do every single day. I'm going to seek your face. I'm going to read your word. I'm going to study it and try to understand all things in life more and more and more. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I had to give up that responsibility. That's Jesus. That's God's responsibility. That's not my responsibility. Right. And for that in itself, pulled a lot of my existential angst off my shoulders. Be like, look, God, I'm gonna put this at the feet of the cross. I'm gonna step back. Whatever things that you bring to me, I'm gonna use to try and help people the best that I can. And and I've seen that in people, like overcoming addictions. Like I've seen people go to prison and just like, they're living a life of sin and they just don't understand it. And then they flip that switch. And instead of, hitting the thing of heroin, they decide to say a prayer.
Right.
And that's hard. Like God never says it's going to be easy.
Right.
But it's the same thing. Like anytime I'm anxious now, don't be anxious in anything, pray in everything. Just trying to shift that perspective is super helpful. And in the New Age movement, that's where I think they get a lot of their quote unquote power, we call it, because at least it's positive instead of being negative, and I know you and I both have our critiques of that.
Right.
But it's been kind of snaked in there. But that's what I'm saying. It's like from a place like Joe Dispenza is a chiropractor, and he talks a lot about positive, thinking. Bruce Lipton. Bruce Lipton. A lot of those guys showing that our thoughts, prayer is powerful.
Right.
I think I think that one thing we'll find out, anything more than anything, is when we get to their side of how much we underutilize prayer.
Yeah. And how many and who probably prayed for us, But that's a great point that maybe we can talk on a little bit more, is just the importance of a connection to God for the full flourishing health of an individual, especially men. Because even if you do the fitness, even if you do the diet, and you do all these minor things that we say are fairly obvious to stay healthy, but then you're in an atheistic worldview, you're in a narcissistic worldview where it's all about yourself, it's all about consumption, it's all about consumerism. I mean, those are going to take you till, those are going to manifest themselves physically in some pretty dark ways. And so aligning yourself to the order, to the logos, to Jesus Christ, to a Christian worldview is essential for health in all these other ways, and when we're hitting the sort of psychological and that dimension of hope that it provides. But I don't know if you said everything you wanted to say, but I think that idea is so important that if you don't have, even in regards to homosexuality and things that have showed it's being tied to your relationship to your Father. Well, men having a relationship to the Father and the Trinity. And that's essential then for you to come into your own flourishing, your own state. And the way in which you can be a provider on earth is which he's a provider for you.
Amen. And I think too, those who live to please the flesh cannot please the spirit. Right. And that's kind of another thing you got to look at from a health perspective is, why are you doing what you're doing? Right. And if you're doing it for yourself, if you're doing it to please yourself, you're always going to come up short, right? Like you have the grace of God. I'm never going to be where I want. I'm going to strive for that. But when you're living for your own body, I mean, I think that's what happens, in anorexia. Like you're looking at yourself every day, trying to critique yourself. And it's like, I'm a child of God. God does love you no matter what.
Right.
That doesn't give you any excuse to lack discipline and not eat healthy.
Right.
Kind of the anti-fat shaming, but it's like, there is a difference between being unhealthy and healthy, and to each their own. I'm not here to judge, but if you're living for the flesh, like you're doing this for yourself and for your body and for vanity, you're missing the mark.
Right.
Right. And that's, one thing I kind of try and focus on is I was been reflecting, it was during Lent, and I was thinking about the persecution of Christ and the apostles after that, to think about them that died and their ability to not live for the flesh. Like they were able to be tortured, this beautiful body that they created. They were willing, because it's like, it's bigger than that. I'm living for the spirit. It doesn't matter. It does matter. This is the ultimate way to show ourselves and to act in the world. And the best way this thing's put together is the healthier I am, the more I take care of my brain, the more I can talk and help people.
Right.
Right. But I'm doing it for the spirit. I'm not doing it for the body's sake. I'm doing it for the sake of the spirit.
Right.
So,
which then it's all about then aligning to God's will. And that's a larger thing in regards to all these other aspects of your life. And that's what this fitness stuff is, I mean, if you truly believe in God, if you're truly thankful for existence, if you're truly thankful for the body you have, well, then how other way do you show thanks for that than taking care of it? That's just like a gift, any type of gift you would get from anybody. If your parents were to give you something, you take care of it to show your respect. Yeah, absolutely. So your respect and your responsibility towards it. And so again, this idea, I think, is just lacking, and where people find it then is in a very vain understanding that, oh, well, then it means that I need to be an Instagram model, or I need a lift so people can see me in this way, as opposed to, no, this is a lifestyle. And then once you do it, you feel so much better, you feel so much more confident. I mean, and doing things that have totally non-physical. I mean, just the idea that you can transform yourself, and therefore you see that physically happen, then you can transform various other aspects of your life and your world. And that is then the path of the sort of masculine principle. It's this moving through time, then taking on the things that are difficult. Something we were talking about with Made by Jim Bob is not staying in the comfortableness of life, but take on the challenge, confront it, conquer it over and over and over again until all you do is win to a degree, but it's all that, and it's all in a sort of, it's all framed in a Christian worldview, of course. So it's not, again, you can't let it get too crazy, but this idea of just continuing to push forward and do what's right. And that means the prayer, that means the diet, that means the physical stuff, that means the way you treat people, the way you talk to people, asking people that maybe do more minor tasks, how they're doing every day, whoever you engage, that somehow you brighten their day in a multitude of ways because you are reflecting that spirit. The spirit is then what you're living for, and that just manifests itself in all these different things.
Well, even when you and I talked before the podcast, I could tell your energy. You were, I don't want to go, rambunctious. You're like, yeah, man, I just got done working out, I'm ready to get at this. Like, how much does that transfer to other people? Right. Like you're saying, you're at the grocery store, and the difference between like beep, beep, instead of like, hey, how are you doing today? Like I just left the, whether it's I left the gym or I slept well, I'm in a great mood, I'm healthy. We get to project that out in the world. And I know, like me, even when I work jobs like that, I'm like, I loved it when people were like, who doesn't like being around someone who's energetic? Right. Someone that kind of just pops everyone up a little bit. And sometimes it's annoying because you're so unhealthy that it bothers you. But at the end of the day, it's like you're doing that for not only, at the end it helps yourself, but it does help other people as well.
Right.
So, amen, brother. Amen.
So, hold on. I feel like there were some other topics we were going to tackle that.
I had one, but I forgot it.
Well, do you have some advice in regards to maybe home fitness? I mean, given the current situation we have, how are you working out? How are you staying fit?
Well, I got something in called I don't know. I should be an affiliate before I start advertising for it. But I got something called a Gorilla Bow and it's like a big metal thing, and you put your bands on the side. You step on it, and then you can do stuff there. But yeah, I got a lot of bands. I got a 35 pound of dumbbell, and then I just run to the park, and then I jump on the jungle gym real quick when no one's looking. Try to avoid
before they give you a ticket. Fine. Yeah, being in California, they're going to take you to jail.
Yeah, I do. I look real quick, and then I run up and just pull ups, push ups. Yesterday, I got together with somebody who played tennis, and then every time you didn't score a point, you missed the point, then we did 5 push ups.
Oh, nice.
Little things like that.
Yeah,
it was fun. But yeah, interesting.
So I'm trying to scroll through here and look at any questions you guys have. So make sure to send them in. I see one guy asked, Brita filter jugs, are they any good?
They're not bad. They're better than nothing. They'll filter out some stuff, but at the end of the day, it's not. I think maybe 6. Like if you get, I have one called the Big Berkey. Like I said, RO and distilled really clean everything out, but then you need to remineralize it. Hey, and again, not medical advice. Don't do anything I said. This is for information purposes only. I know you guys won't sue me, but kind of a little disclaimer there. But yeah, Brita's definitely better than nothing. It will get like, I think 60 to 70% out of like, chlorine and fluoride. Most things won't get fluoride out.
Oh, okay.
I think that one's kind of people.
What is your opinion on fluoride?
So I want to double check on the organic chemistry, but if I remember right, fluoride is in the halogen group. And so the electronegativity of fluoride, chloride, iodine, and bromine. I've heard this theory before because they have the same electronegativity. Iodine is the backbone to your thyroid hormone. And there seems like there is some form of a correlation between at least chlorine. People, like a lot of swimmers, when they get older, end up having people were in chlorinated pools a lot
Yeah.
end up having thyroid disorders like Hashimoto's and Graves' disease.
Oh, interesting.
It's so hard to tell, man. That's the problem is in the last 20, 30 years, we've introduced so many new variables.
Right.
Right. I mean, with the fluorine, it's a lot like the immunity shots, in my opinion. It may have done something for a little while. At this point, I bet you could completely take it out of the water, and I would put a big bet down that it probably wouldn't change the amount of cavities, more or less.
Okay.
It may have done what we said, but now with the way we brush our teeth, that we have dentists, I don't think it's necessary, and it does have has highly negativity, a lot of negativity, and basically that causes free radical damage. Basically, your body wants to maintain balance, and anything that has a high electronegativity, even like oxygen, will go in and just destroy everything.
So you do recommend people brushing their teeth with Toms?
Yeah, I don't use fluorinated
Toothpaste.
Yeah. And yeah, I have a fluoride filter myself.
So
I don't think it's necessary.
Another good question somebody wrote is the water poisoned? And so I think that's a great way to go into the sort of estrogen and some of the other stuff that's in the water. So can you talk about the sort of poisoning of the well, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we had circumstances like we said earlier, just about like atrazine in the well water. But a lot of these, a lot of the particles that are in the water are parts per million, right? They're tiny little particles. And I talked a little bit about that, some of the harsh chemicals we use that get washed into our water supply. But even like women who are taking birth control they're urinating a lot of those hormones out of into the sewer system. And it's like, how well is that being filtered? You can tell different cities, going in different cities, you can drink the water and it tastes harder or softer. Right. And that's even from copper pipes. There's, the plastics in certain PVC pipe where the water is going through. Like in my new apartment, the water that comes out of there tastes terrible, right? It's because it's probably all new piping and all new metals. And heavy metals do different things in the body that we don't, like high amounts of aluminum and mercury and lead. We know there's a plethora of things in the water that I don't think we understand very well, and that's why I'm just filtered out, remineralize it, and don't take chances.
Right.
My opinion.
So, let's see. There was another one here in regards to pornography. So you mentioned testosterone. Can you speak a little bit more, because that's probably something that a lot of people have been dealing with in regards to getting control of that nasty habit that is proliferated in our culture, especially for young men, as a way to resolve with really that when you increase your natural testosterone, your free testosterone. So you're going to have to become more disciplined about that stuff. Can you speak then to how does masturbating and watching pornography affect one's health?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be first in line and say I was a victim of pornography. I went through, I remember going through all that, and I've done my best to get rid of it.
Absolutely. We all have.
It's hard, There's a dopamine kick from it, and this gets back to, I even think from an evolutionary perspective again. Not even from God, evolution, like the survival of God's will through the progression of how we act, right? Mm-hmm. And so, number one, I think it's absolutely terrible in relationships, right? Like, how is that? Number one, how is that not cheating? You're coveting another thing, right? And I think it shows men and makes them think that that women are just a sex thing. Right? You don't view them as a person. You view them like they're a source of pleasure. Right. People were meant to be loved. Things were meant to be used. Yeah, right? Don't switch it up. And at that point, a woman becomes something you use for pleasure. And there are studies that have shown that guys that are masturbating decreases testosterone. They're debatable. They're not the best. They're not the best performed studies, and there's not a whole lot of evidence to it. But from me, from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense that. If you're masturbating all the time, for instance, one thing we know when you fast, right? When you fast, your growth hormone goes up. Well, why? Your body learns to utilize what it has. Mm-hmm. So therefore, when an opportunity to hunt or do something, it has a higher amount. So if you are ejaculating every day, then the body why is the testosterone going to be high? I don't need to mate. I'm getting all the mating that I want all the time.
Oh, right. Right.
Yeah, and from sperm production and a good ejaculatory load increases after at least 3 to 5 days. anytime you're given sperm samples, and that's something we didn't bring up, that sperm counts are down like 70% from like the 40s. It's bad. Sperm counts are down, infertility rates are up. That's something we didn't really talk about.
Right.
And I think that has to do with everything we've talked about. And, we didn't really talk about radiation. There were some studies showing that cell phones in the pockets decrease Leydig cell production. We didn't talk about Roundup. Monsanto, Roundup Ready, has been shown to be cytotoxic to the Leydig cells in the testes that produce testosterone. That's why you need to eat organic. I know it can be expensive, and some of the organic stuff is even corrupt now,
and that was tied to the next question I was going to ask you. I saw in the chat, and then we have a couple of super chats here. So anybody that has some questions, super chat Dr. Mo. This is your time to ask anything related to your health. We got, I know, a good one that just came in, but before that, he was asking you about, well, you're advocating us eat more meat. Well, then how do you, at an ethical level, justify that with the sort of mass meat production in the country? Because it seems like both are true. We need more meat, but also the way in which meat production and packaging exists isn't exactly ethical.
Yeah, no, and I'm first in line to say that I don't think you should be buying factory farmed food, and that's why you want to try and buy grass-fed stuff. And I get it. Then comes the argument, well, is that sustainable? Right? My opinion, if a society were to shift, it's like, is it sustainable to work out for 1 hour a day every day? I don't have time for that. We make time for that. And if this society were to shift in a certain way, it's like, you know what? Sorry, we have to give up half the land out there so that our animals can be free range. And if you look up Joel Stoughton, I think's his name, he's a very progressive farmer, and he shows about like how you should have cows and beef in one area, and cows and chickens and pigs in one area, and then you put the crops next to it, and then the next year you shift them, right? So that all the poop and everything fertilizes the crops, and we don't do that. Our monocrop farming that's a whole other conversation. I grew up on a farm like that. We did the same crops over and over again. Like that, we're doing the same crops over and over again, and then we fertilize it with NP and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those plants require more than 3 minerals. That's one of the other problems with mono crop farming. And again, though, but it's like feed the world. I get it. There's arguments on both sides. Right. I say what I do is I try and buy from farmers that I know. I have a place out here called J Grass-Fed Beef, so I'm trying to support a local farmer, and that's the best you can do at this point. But if we all start shifting and we all start doing that, and we stop buying, that's where I do believe in a form of capitalism, that if you put your money where you're voting, stop buying Tyson chicken. Yeah. If that person's doing something corrupt, like that should be all of us everywhere with everything, and we just don't do that.
Right.
And it's tough, and I believe, according to the Bible, that God gave animals for us to eat. We're the shepherds of the land, and that's what nature does. Like there's one of my favorite Instagrams is Nature's Metal. Yeah, and it shows like a pack of hyenas just like tearing apart a little gazelle. Like the gazelle is just sitting there crying. It's like it's our form of morals that we project on the animals, right? And that's not what God said. We're trying to be master of the universe, saying like this is ethical and this is unethical. And I do see that in factory farming. I do agree that's unethical. Right. But at the end of the day, we got to put our money where our mouth is. And there's if you listen to Rob Wolf, Paleo Solution. He does a real good job of talking about that actually grass-fed farming can help change the world just in the way that the environment is shifted, right? Just in the way that you create a little ecosystem for the animals and for the, it'll help with the gardens, it'll help with all the plants and everything. So it's a good question though. And trust me, I feel bad. I try and eat always organic grass-fed. So first super chat comes from Owen, our good buddy and ortho bro. Make sure to check out his orthodox stuff over on Telegram. Owen, go ahead and throw that in the chat so people can follow you on Telegram. He said, these videos on masculinity and men's health really help, King. Much needed in today's society. Thanks to both of you fellas. Roman salute. Thanks, you, brother. Thank you, brother. Really appreciate that. And again, follow him on Twitter and on his Telegram. Throw all those links in the live chat so people can follow your stuff. And then we got another super chat, 20 pounds, Byzantine warrior. Thank you very much, brother. And he says, what advice would you give a male with paresis? It's basically a phobia of urinating in the presence of other people. Example given, I struggle psychologically using the urinals in public restrooms. Have I low testosterone? What should I do? Yeah, I'll be number one. I'm not giving medical advice, but that's actually quite common, and I think that there are, like for instance, with sleeping. All right, we're starting to discover that there's different patterns with the way that people sleep. Some people are like sleep all through the night. Some people sleep sporadically, and I think even like I know this sounds weird. This is kind of only my own personal theory with urinating. It would make sense that you probably wouldn't feel that comfortable urinating right next to someone. And I've had this from a lot of my patients talk about. It's actually very common. Like you go to like a Cubs game or a Cardinals game, and you're in a urinal, and guys are trying to pee, especially when they are drunk. It's hard. It's like a lot of it, in my opinion, is psychosomatic. It has to do with like you don't feel comfortable, and it's a lot kind of like the ED thing. You don't want to pee in front of someone because you don't feel safe, right? I hope there's no psychological trauma going on there, man. That might be a place to start. Like if there's ever been some stuff that literally that happened to you, or even just stress. It's really weird how the body keeps score. So when bad stuff happens, it can go kind of anywhere in the body. But again, I think from psychological perspective too, there's maybe something going on there sexually. So
and it could just be a sort of psychological feedback loop, because maybe it happened one time, say any given circumstance. Nervousness. And so could be, again, no trauma, but they just get caught up in that psychological feedback loop every time they get in a position where maybe they feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, stage fright.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. Like you can't like you're not going to be able to get a good erection in front of and I mean, unless you're really worked on it. But most guys, if you sit in front of a stage of 40,000 people, you're not going to be able to get an erection. And I'm pretty sure that I don't know about you, I would probably have a hard time peeing in front of like 40,000 people. I think it's just, it's uncomfortable. You're sexually exposing yourself, and unless you're some wires are crossed there.
Right.
I think it's halfway quite normal.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm sure I just know from friends and myself that that's something that guys do have problems with, is sort of psychological feedback loops that are going to manifest themselves in different ways, and maybe public urination being one of them. So yeah, I think that's actually a great question.
And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure too the urination is parasympathetic. It's a weird one, because when people are super sympathetic, they'll end up shitting themselves. Like when long distance runners, you'll see after they run for so long, they're in such a sympathetic state that their bowels like let loose. So there's a real weird. It's kind of like coffee. Like coffee can make you poop, but actually it's a sympathetic agonist. I do know that one thing you could look into with urination problems, caffeine and other anything that can irritate the bladder, because your bladder, you're kind of a tube, and your bladder is a pouch, and it's like if your kidneys filter stuff and they store it in your bladder, and then you urinate it out. It's kind of like your bladder's just full of stuff your body's ready to get rid of. Right. So artificial dyes and colors and chemicals and stuff will sit in your bladder, and it'll cause irritation. You can get, and I had that. It's called interstitial cystitis, just an inflammatory condition of the bladder, and it's no different than putting like different oils and chemicals on your skin. You're going to get irritation in the bladder.
Oh wow!
And so, and if you have any other problems going on in the bladder, that can cause problems. It depends on your age. Hopefully, it can be a prostate problem too. I don't know on your age,
right?
But that happens as we age too, guys. Sorry, and we didn't even talk about prostate, but as you age, your prostate grows. That's part of the game. 90% of the guys, 90% of men who at the age of 80, they're going to have a prostate problem. Whether it's cancer, and it's very debatable what is considered cancer, because it grows, and when it grows, it presses on the bladder, it makes you feel like you got to go, and it squeezes on it, which makes it harder for the fluid to come out.
Oh, interesting.
So you could have an inflamed prostate too. Again, not medical advice, just talking to a friend.
Right. Yeah, we're just speaking. But that's a great question, and it relates to. Okay, so the gentleman who just asked us responded by saying it's not due to any bad experience. It's like when I'm in front of a urinal, I just psychologically can't piss. It's fine in cubicle. Had it since about 13 and annoys me, but he's 21 now. So
more psychological.
Yeah, psychological.
And not to say anything's wrong. Like it's completely normal. That's what happens. Really, and I've heard that. I'll be at a bar and I'll like
you'll be sitting there next to a guy in the stall next to you, and the guy's like, you can tell he's not going and you're not going, and then you start going, and I don't know, maybe I'm the one. This guy probably does that. I do that.
Right. Yeah. You try to think about what the other person's thinking or something, and you get caught in a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't even talk about, I remembered one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, because we've talked about it privately, is energy drinks and caffeine, because you mentioned too much caffeine. And I know I went through a period where I was just consuming a lot of caffeine a day. And I was still, some days I'd take a nap or something. It's like, it was just, I was on caffeine overload. And so I've been trying to cut that back, and I've noticed positive effects from that. But I was curious if you can speak, because I'm sure, like a lot of the guys out there, you have to, you can't just not cut out the caffeine, because you still have to do things. You have to work, and it gets you through the day. And I know we've talked about this, and you're in the same boat in the sort of habitual use of caffeine. So can you speak to that generally, and again, in regards to men's health and kind of what guys are dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, I think this comes down to, what is caffeine? It stimulates us. It blocks the adenosine receptor in the brain. It's actually a natural pesticide. So when a bug eats like a yerba mate leaf that has caffeine in it, it kills it. It shuts off its energy production pretty much. And this is where you probably heard Paul Saladino talk about the carnivore diet. And this is one of his big critiques, is a lot of these, what we think are good for us, like caffeine, is actually, it does damage to the body and has what's called a hormetic effect. And then it's the response to it that then our body upregulate. It's kind of like exercise. You do a bicep curl, it's not really actually that good on the body, but what happens after is good on the body. So then there's a debate, how much is too much and how much isn't enough. And one of the things that's interesting though about coffee drinkers is a lot of the long-term studies show that coffee drinkers seem like they do live healthier lives. And I think that's because caffeine induces the sympathetic pathway. All right. And so basically it activates what's called cyclic AMP, which is this like what I talked about earlier. It helps the body utilize all that it has. It's easier to fast on caffeine, right? It's kind of like an induced exercise. Like you do a bit of caffeine, it feels like you just went for a run, like you're energized. It helps utilize blood sugar better. So I do think that there are some positive benefits to caffeine. Now, caffeine has a 6-hour half-life, and we know that, or 4 to 6, just 4 to 7. It depends on the person. Everyone's different. We do know that though it will inhibit your deep sleep. So one of the main things that I always talk about with caffeine is make sure that you're not doing any, hopefully at least 6 hours before bed. So if you're hitting caffeine, doing a big thing at like 5 o'clock, and you're trying to go to bed at like 10 o'clock, if you did 300 milligrams, you're still having 150 in that, right? Like those bangs are about 300 milligrams of caffeine, which is like 2-3 cups of coffee. So if you do one of those at 3 p.m., you still have a cup of coffee floating around in your bloodstream before bed.
Wow.
So it's going to inhibit your deep sleep. What happens in deep sleep? You release testosterone, you release growth hormone, your body repairs, your immune system turns on, your kidneys and liver filter everything out. So, and me too, but I've used it, and I think that comes down to us living in a society that's just not as stimulating as it used to be, right? So it used to be like,
is it from overstimulation? And I mean, because it's obviously we're more stimulated to a degree. I mean, maybe you need to define what you mean by stimulation, but it seems like we're overstimulated.
Yeah, we would have like dopamine dependency, right? Like you're right, we're like overly stimulated, and because of that, our threshold for what we need is higher.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like where it used to be, at least to me, I can talk about, like, think about even growing up, like I didn't have my headphones in all the time. Like now when I go to the gym, I'm like headphones on, caffeine, okay, got to get really pumped up. Where it used to be like, dude, I was a kid, I just go outside and run around. But now it's like you got to pump yourself up.
Right.
But again, I think that has to do with our jobs and our lives aren't as stimulating in the way that they should be. Right. Where it used to be stimulated by providing for your family, being a breadwinner. You would go outside and cut down a tree. I can tell you, like cutting grass. When I was done cutting grass, I felt a sense of accomplishment and a dopamine kick. And I think that's kind of what we're searching for in anything, drugs, alcohol, and caffeine is a drug.
Right.
So I just do my best. I think, try and keep it under about 300 milligrams. I think kgs. It's 10 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. No, that's way too much.
Yeah, because if I'm 80 kgs, I want to have like 3 milligrams per kilogram, or per pound, like
So do you
1.5.
do you recommend certain caffeine sources over other ones? Like, I personally, when I need a pick me up, I like the 5 hour energies because they're quick and they're short, and I don't have to drink a bunch of stuff. Or the Monster energy drinks. You talked about the Bang, coffee. What are your thoughts on all these different types of energy drinks, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, I like to do green tea. I try and do whatever's
green
closest
tea.
to
That's
nature.
not gonna do nothing for you.
Yeah, I mean, Buy energy drinks? They're like 45 milligrams, and that's what I'm saying. Exactly, you're right. You got to drink so much of it, and I'm trying to cut back. I'm trying to have only a little bit. I've done that. Celsius is a company that I actually like. As far as that has to do with like what's in the drink, right? Like whether it has like artificial flavors and dyes and colors. Theirs is pretty good. I feel like Bang has like a bunch of chemicals, bunch of stuff you can't pronounce. You've probably heard that. If there's stuff in there you can't pronounce, probably shouldn't be drinking it. I think coffee that's organic and away from molds, right? Mold's a big problem with coffee. But I do mostly I think Buy energy drinks. They're green tea. Some of those come in plastics, so I'll sell myself out. But I like the Celsius, and I can't do coffee. And I think that's because I have MTHFR mutations.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think some of the powders are good.
I love the taste of coffee, and that was my problem. Is I would drink coffee all the time, and I basically
once you're dependent, I think it's kind of a problem, right? Like if you're using it to kind of boost performance, I think that's okay. If you're using it like I need a little more energy to write this, it's okay. But if like I would get to a point where I like wake up and I'm like need coffee or caffeine in the first 20, 30 minutes of waking up, that your body, when you wake up, your cortisol gets produced and raises your blood sugar. And if it's not doing it on its own, you're pretty run down. And that comes down to you overworking and being too stressed.
Right. Well, it looks like the last question we have over here, and if you guys have any, feel free to send them in real quick. Owen said, "What do you think of Dr. John Bergman, DC, on YouTube? Have you heard of him?"
Yeah, he's got a pretty popular YouTube channel. I think he's a chiropractor, and they're good, like any profession, right? And like I talked earlier, I'm actually a naturopathic. Well, it depends on what state I'm in. Naturopathic doctor. In other states, I'm a physician. But he says some good things, and there's some stuff. And I've only watched maybe 5 or 10 of his videos. Overall, I think he's doing his best to provide quality information, and I take everything with a grain of salt. So I'll listen to him, and then I go, and if he says something, I'll try and find an article. I go on PubMed. He said turmeric decreases TNF alpha. I'm like, all right, let me see. Does turmeric decrease TNF alpha? Oh, here's a paper. Shows it decreases TNF alpha, which is inflammation. Okay, turmeric might help decrease inflammation. Unfortunately, you guys know this with fake news. Like you got to check everything yourself anymore.
Right.
It's tough. And there's a handful of people on YouTube. And I don't know everything, right? So I'm not saying that I'm the end all be all, but I keep my head on a swivel, and I listen to people, and hopefully I learn something.
Owen threw us another £5. Thank you, brother. And he was asking, what would you recommend a dude with bad taste buds have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? He wants a Chad diet. He's slim at the moment, and he wants to be an Ubermensch.
Oh, okay. A little Nietzsche fan, huh?
Yeah.
I personally do like I think paleo is a pretty easy way for most people to start.
Okay.
And that's like again with the sugar, because carnivore is great. Like if he's trying to put on some size, it's just going to be hard to put on size with carnivore. I mean, unless you can eat 10 pounds of steak a day, it's just really hard to get.
Right. And a lot of big time fitness guys and bodybuilders, they recommend having good carbs.
Yeah.
In your diet, because that's what, if you want to start gaining size, you're going to need the carbs. If you're already a size that you like and you in a good lifestyle, then hitting the carnivore diet, you're going to start slimming down and feeling good. But it sounds like he wants to gain some size. So, what good carb sources? So, like what'd be a good breakfast? Eggs, dairy. Do you recommend dairy? What do you recommend for a good breakfast, a good lunch, and a good dinner?
Yeah, I mean, again, every person's individualized. Like I'm like I said, I go paleo, so I'll stay away from most dairy and my grains. I don't really touch. I'll do some grain-free bread. Like I did avocado toast this morning with chicken sausage. All right. So, and then, lunch, you like chicken, sweet potatoes. I think regular potatoes are okay. Mung bean. I think a lot of the beans are pretty good because they have a low glycemic index. So I think beans, as long as it's good on your digestion, lentils, mung beans, you can do lentil and mung bean pastas now. Again, I know I said don't eat it out of a box, but if you're trying to put on some size.
Right.
So what I'll do is I'll get some like mung bean pasta and then throw some ghee in there. That's clarified butter. And then, bake some chicken or bake some, make a steak, bison. Trying to think what are kind of my staples. But I'll go. I'm trying to think what you want to call it, like a paleo. Like I'll do cassava flour tortillas,
okay,
and I'll make tacos from there. You can kind of switch it up and find, like you can get pasta. Like there's mung bean pastas, there's there's lentils, there's other ways to kind of go about eating those other foods, but really at the end of the day, you're going to just want to work on eating more. And,
right.
Hey, I do coconut ice cream. I'm trying to put on some size. So again, the devil's in the detail as far as maybe you could eat a little bit of sugar, how's your insulin sensitivity? So,
right.
Goals make a difference too.
But definitely up the meat, so if he's trying to gain size, I personally would recommend some carbs.
Yeah. I think, like I said, sweet potatoes.
I'm big on the potatoes myself. I eat a lot of potatoes with my steaks, but so maybe for breakfast,
oils, he can throw avocado on anything.
Yeah, so
mayo.
So for breakfast,
egg whites.
Multiple eggs. I eat eggs every single morning, but I throw cheese on them. So Dr. Mo would probably not recommend that.
I do cheese. It just depends. Every person's different, especially when it comes like lactose intolerance, and then that point in cheese, a lot of times the sugar is out, it's gone, it's been fermented out. So, but then there's other things, man, like histamine reactions. Like cheddar cheeses have a little bit more of a histamine reaction, which is inflammatory. So really, you need to sit down with a good integrative, doctor or dietitian, and really that'd be the best suggestion.
Okay.
Obviously you can take some of the things that we talked about here, but individualized. Every person's individualized.
Another question from Gabrielle R. She said, "How can I avoid muscle loss since I can't go to the gym now?"
Yeah, good luck. I don't know. Yeah, really, at the end of the day, the main argument for one of the amino acids called leucine, right? It's a branched chain amino acid, and these amino acids do signal to the body. So when you're eating enough protein, the body looks and says, okay, it's kind of like bricks, right? And you're building a house. Do you have enough bricks to keep building, or do you not? So, to avoid going catabolic, which means to break down, is to at least do some form of exercise and then just eat a decent amount of protein.
Right.
As long as you're not in a caloric deficit, your body really shouldn't break anything down. And when you work out, you activate what are called your GLUT4 receptors, which are your insulin receptors. So it does turn your muscles on to feed them, basically. So a little bit actually goes a long way. It's really kind of like the 80-20 principle. Like a little bit of exercise is a whole lot better than none at all. So even if it's just like jumping jacks, push-ups, and pull-ups or whatever, like that is going to tell the body, hey, I'm trying to build muscle. Body says, do I have enough calories, and do I specifically have enough amino acids? Yes, I do. All right, we're going to maintain. So the thing is, like when you're in a caloric deficit and you're working out, the body says, it's kind of like if you're city and then you have wood. If you have more than enough wood, then your body's going to be building more houses. But if you only have so much wood, then your body's going to burn it for firewood.
Right.
So, and that's where I do kind of agree on the calories in versus calories out. But again, devil in the detail there. Hormones make a big difference, and the type of food makes a big difference as well too.
Right. Right. Well, that looks like a lot of people saying thank you. Be careful with insecticides on the potatoes.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are really thankful for a lot of the ideas, especially how maybe they can change their diet, how they can start implementing small little things in their lives to, especially as men, to save your and preserve your ability to produce high amounts of testosterone and continue that. It's all about longevity here. And so for men, your testosterone is everything for your skin, for your muscles, for the way you feel, your energy, your vitality. And we want to maintain that as long as possible. Yeah, your brain. We want to maintain that as long as possible. And
you can get into conspiracies. You can look at society now and like what's happening to the modern man. He's dwindling away. He's a shadow of his former self. And trust me, I don't like using the term toxic masculinity and all that. And there is a level of when, the bad father, right? Like that happens, scar or whatever you want to be. Like there's bad spots. But overall, I think we could use some more majestic masculinity, right? The Christ-like masculinity, like that, no greater love than to lay down your life for another person. Like I bet Jesus had an optimal amount of testosterone. Like if you're going to go and do what he did, to speak the way that he spoke and the way that he interacted and he loved people, like you got to be pretty tough.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes we think about that as like not masculine is what I'm getting at. I'm like, that's the ultimate form of masculinity is like sacrifice and helping other people and responsibility.
Absolutely. And that's what I was trying to hammer home in my last combo with Made by Jim Bob, is that Christ is, not to confine it to Jungian or semiotic understandings, but he is an archetype of what masculinity does in terms of the immense responsibility of dying for the sins of the world, the ability to love in the face of danger, all these things, protect people. I mean, he protected, and he's a victor, right? That was something that Subdeacon Mark always talked about in our video of atonement, is that he's never a victim. That is not a descriptor of Christ at any point in his existence. He's always a victor. And so that as then an image of what a man should be, I think that really resonates with people. And it also makes a lot of sense in how all this Christian stuff is reflecting on a cultural level and why so many people are returning to more traditional worldviews, to traditional understandings, to traditional religion and the formation of families. Because, just society, everything we've talked about. I mean, society is in opposition. The medical establishment, the water, I mean, everything is in opposition to what we've been trying to advocate in this video in regards to taking care of your body, building a physique, something that you're proud of, to take responsibility of the temple.
Well, they, just like little boys, what do? They stick them in school. Like men you don't learn that way. We don't learn by sitting at a desk. You get your hands dirty. You get out. Most men are tactile learners. Right?
Absolutely.
Like there's a lot of thing against boys. And there has been, like a kid's throwing a snowball and you're going to put him in detention. Like that's part of being a kid, like hand-eye coordination and playing it fun. Like I used to get in trouble on the playground all the time just for like playing ball tag, and to kind of to just circle back a little bit. Yeah. It's sad. And like Jesus, I don't think they don't put him in like the stoic, when you say stoic, you don't think Jesus. And it's like, and I bring this up because I was thinking of like Leonidas when you're talking about victor versus victory,
right?
And the part where he's like the one Athenian comes and he's like, "Oh, we're surrounded, we're doomed," and Leonidas is like, "Yes, victory! Like we're gonna do what we came here to do."
Yeah, victory. Yes.
And to be like, this is why we're here, and the same thing with Jesus, to be whipped, to be beaten in front of his friends betray him, his mother sitting there watching him get tortured, and Jesus is like, this is why I'm here. And that's that is victory. You cannot be defeated, and that's the same thing. We have to take that in life and all the other things we do in our relationships, in our diet. It's like, what's what we're here to do, people. So,
right. Absolutely. Amen to that. Looks like I think we've grabbed all the questions. So thank you guys for everything. We're going to bounce out of here. Hope everybody has a wonderful Monday. We've been talking for about 2 hours now. So great combo. Thanks for coming on, Dr. Mo. You want to hit people with how they can find you on social media, how they can follow your work, support you?
Sure thing. Yeah. I'm in your comments quite often. I love all the work you do. So I'm always glad to collaborate. But yeah, my YouTube channel is Dr. Mo. And so I do a lot of talk about peptides and testosterone and health. And I'm doing a little more, what do I want to say, philosophy, just kind of, deep thinking. I've had Patrick on several times. We just did one kind of on the virus and everything, and talking about Gil Bates and stuff too. So I always enjoy our conversations and doing these things as well. So yeah, YouTube's probably the easiest way to find me. You can find me on Instagram as well. So
we just had another question come in. Is feudalism, and this by Owen again, thank you again, brother, for the £5. Is feudalism the best political system for encouraging an environment of masculinity? What do you think about feudalism or based farms? So
I kind of want to say yes, really. So when I look at like Amish, right, it depends on what my philosophy background is strong. Feudalism, I think about like medieval farms, right? Yeah. Like it's kind of the whole community is built around that. And I mean, my perfect world would be that. Like I want to move back. I want to create a farm, a self-sustaining farm, build a community around that, gather my own water, like live, be a sovereign individual, especially now with all the virus stuff going on.
That's hate speech now, talking about sovereignty and freedom.
Yeah, I know, right? I think it's a real good way to look at it. When you look at the Amish, and I would love to do a study on that. I would love to go and see how their hormone levels are. But what we do know is they're some of the happiest people. Like as far as like as low as depression and anxiety, the Amish are up there.
And reproductivity, that tied into a question earlier about sort of demographics that I thought may get a little too dicey, but in regards to how do you see fitness and reproduction and all that stuff and health playing into the demographic changes in the United States? And so
it's so funny you bring that up, because to be honest, I was thinking about the whole pandemic thing in like January, like kind of before it happened. And we saw that with Native Americans. What happens when the white man came over, we gave them all kinds of diseases. And what's crazy is when we look at stuff like the flu, one of the problems with flu immunity shots is by the time they come out with them, the virus is already replicated and changed, right? Nothing's perfect. So one of the things that's very interesting is as we've had globalism kind of come in from a health perspective, number one, you kind of look at, man, I got to really watch my words here.
Yes, please.
Yeah. When you look at fitness, I think you know where I want to go, but I want to make sure that I would say it properly. We don't know, man. We really don't. When people are flying all over the world and we're intermingling in a way we've never done before, we've only been doing this for 50 to 100 years.
Right.
And I'm all for diversity. I'm from a small town farm. I'm in Southern California.
Right.
And I've had, relationships with different ethnicities and everything. And just from a fitness perspective, though, we'll see. There's like everything. There's going to be positives and negatives to anything. There's probably going to be good things that come out of it that might make it higher amounts of fitness, and there might be lower amounts of fitness. That's the only way logically it can work out.
Right.
There might be some outliers on both ends. So we'll see, man. I don't want to say anything either way that could come off being
right. Yeah, it's a difficult question to talk about on YouTube, especially. So appreciate the question being asked, but I was hesitant.
There are questions that need to be asked like
right,
that. And
right.
And I need to figure out ways to answer it ethically, right? And trying to figure out the pluses and the minuses to everything. But like I said, the main thing that I was reflecting on was just like the amount of disease that gets around so quickly, so fast, right? One of the things they're showing right now with the virus is they think what happened in New York was actually a mutated strain out of Italy. It wasn't even the one from Wuhan. And who knows? But that is at least something I think we should ponder, that like all kinds of sicknesses and viruses, they mutate and they change and they move. And with our accessibility, our ability to interact with people so quickly, you can have a virus in China, and one person could go to New York, Italy, and California in a week and infect the whole world.
Right. So
who knows what that means or what we're supposed to do about it? I'm not suggesting anything.
Right. Yeah.
Something to consider.
Well, the whole multiculturalism, the globalism, the interracial marriage and stuff like that. This is a modern, contemporary phenomenon. So there's not a whole lot of long-term, not just data, but evidence to see where this is all going in regards to fitness and stuff like that. But
that's
certainly at a cultural level, we can see why people would prefer certain things, and there should be no stigma with having preferences, and I think that's why those that be try to stigmatize having preferences, and even in related to more of the LGBTQ stuff and how it's hostile to say no to an advance by certain individuals, that we're seeing this immense relativism and where people can't even have preferences, which they should, especially when you're talking about the passing of your genes and your lineage. I mean, these things are they're very important. So it's good to take it seriously, and it's not a bad thing to have a preference.
I think I told you when I interviewed at medical school, they asked me if I was prejudiced, which I would assume that they probably didn't ask that about any other ethnicity. I'm a white kid from the, I talked about, I told them in my interview, part of my, you write an interview paper, basically an acceptance, like, why do you think you'd be good to get into medical school? Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm from a small town, hard worker, grew up on a farm. My dad owns business. I can get stuff done. And then this late, she had asked me, she goes, are you prejudiced? And I was like, excuse me? She goes, are you prejudiced? And I said, well, are you asking me that am I more comfortable with things that I already know? Yeah, I am. I am 100% more comfortable with things that I already know. And I think most people are. That's how the human body works. That's basic parasympathetic, sympathetic innervation. When you're in a comfortable environment and you're around things that you know, you're going to thrive a little bit better often. Now, certain people, I said, look at me. I'm choosing to move out to Southern California to become a doctor in an area some people don't like or agree with. So I'm still very open to diversity, and I'm open to exploring and seeing and learning new things. But I think almost all people are prejudiced. Like, that's like saying, I've never played hockey and you asked me to go play basketball. I'm like, I've been playing basketball my whole life. I'm very comfortable playing basketball.
Right.
I'll go try hockey, but if I had to pick one, I'm like, I'm way more comfortable playing basketball.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's a good metaphor to use. So, all right. Well, we will cut off this. Yeah. Thank you, brother, for hopping on. And you already told everybody how to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
So Dr. Mo, subscribe to him on YouTube, and I will put later on. I'll put the links in the video description so you guys can click those. But anyways, thanks for everybody who sent in a super chat. Hope we answered everybody's questions who had anything they wanted to ask. And we will see you in the next stream. I have one that I want to throw together probably Wednesday on pre-Socratic philosophy. Potentially, though, that may be with Subdeacon Mark. He is wanting to talk about a few things. So definitely going to have one Wednesday and Friday this week. So keep an eye out for that. And go, like I said, subscribe to Dr. Mo and stay up to date with his content. So thank you guys. Have a blessed Monday, and hope everybody stays safe and stay in positive spirits despite the circumstances. And so until next time, as always, God bless.